So are you ready to begin?
I am.
I'll repeat the question and count to 3. What is your name, what do you do, and where do you work?
My name is Ginger Hinchcliffe, and I work at the NOAA's Coastal Services Center in Charleston. And at the Coastal Services Center, I manage the Coastal Management Services Division, which includes things like social science, training, the fellowship program, communications, meeting, convening services, those kinds of things.
And cut.
And cut.
It's a wrap.
This table weighs 4. Rolling.
And I'll repeat the question and count to 3. Why are you a proponent of collaboration in coastal management?
So, coastal management is, by nature, integrated. It's integrated coastal management. It goes by ICM. Yes, ICM. And because it is integrated, it's cross-disciplinary. And because it's integrated and cross-disciplinary, there's no one set of information or no one perspective is going to be able to address all the pretty integrated and complex issues that coastal management's asked to address. And so I think collaboration is the way to go, because this way we're not fighting each other. We're actually trying to integrate and solve the problems. And if we just hear from one perspective, it's just one perspective. And a great example is if there's a perspective on something needs to be restored, or some kind of regulation has to come down to protect an area. That's great, and I might share that perspective, but the people living adjacent to it may not. Or they may be the ones that support that, but then the people who are commuting in and out, or the people who normally recreate in that area, may not agree. And so it's only by actually getting those different perspectives and working together to solve the issue in a collaborative fashion can we really move forward on addressing them. Because if one group gets its way, it may be a win, but it might be a very short-term win. And so with collaborative process, I feel like that is like the way we can all sort of get together, agree, hear each other's perspectives, and then move towards the solution together. Not only is it a solution, but it's actually an implementable solution.
And cut.
Is that about like the...
Yeah, I'm just making, yeah, there you go. Good, Ginger.
All right. Okay. So I'll repeat the question and count to 3. What can leaders, why is the NEARS positioned to lead or contribute to collaborative projects and programs?
The NEARS have a real role in collaborative projects, particularly, of course, as they address coastal areas and coastal natural resources. And the reason for that is really pretty easy. One is that they are in the communities, and they're long-term residents of the communities. They work with the communities, they work with the natural areas, and so they not only have typically the respect, but also the long-term relationships with the groups. And there's a real trust build-up, because they don't come in, address one issue and then leave. The other real key point of the NERS is that they have cross-disciplinary staff, and so they have the researchers that are able to not only do their own research, but bring researchers in to address particular issues. They also have the CTP coordinators and the outreach coordinators, whether they be stewardship or the friends groups or the education folks or CTP. They are able to actually facilitate discussions with the community. And that facilitation of the collaborative process is a real skill. And it requires relationships, it requires knowing when to bring in expertise, having the relationships to bring in the expertise, and then you have, of course, then the outreach to the community for the results. And so the managers are saying, okay, these are the priorities, these are where we're able to address, but then you have this whole team of cross-disciplinary people that have that relationship and can bring the collaborative process to the community.
And cut. Yeah, you were good. The little...
Rolling.
I'll ask the question again and count to 3. What can leaders in coastal management do to motivate or incentivize people to adopt more collaborative approaches in their work?
So when we talk about collaboration and collaborative approaches, I think the tone is really set by the leadership. And I think that it's absolutely critical that the leaders and the leadership not only recognize the value of it, and by recognizing the value, I mean the long-term value, because in the short run, there are some really, I guess, cost, and the cost include things like time and resources. So to start with, they have to recognize those short-term costs and acknowledge that those are important to invest in for the long-term gain of this solutions, and real solutions, those implementable solutions that I was talking about before. And so in terms of leadership, I think they can invest time and recognize the resources, allow their staff to pursue those. I think there's also a skill that we need to recognize goes into this collaborative process, and we've seen many collaborative process fail because the people that are trying to implement it are doing their best they absolutely can, but they don't have the skills or the knowledge, because it is a set of learning and a set of skills that come with this and are needed to actually do this effectively. So I think the skill building, the resources, and I also think they need to set the tone by modeling good behavior. I work with someone, my boss is incredibly collaborative, and it's that working across agencies and organizations that actually move us ahead. And by setting the tone, we all know that it's not only allowed to reach out and work with other people, but it's pretty much expected to. And I think that that's what leadership does. It sets the expectations, because they're not working for the short term, they're working for those long-term solutions. Was that?
Oh my God. Rolling.
Right, look at a little birdie up there.
What's that?
Bird watching.
Okay, I'll repeat the question and count to 3. How did you become interested in collaboration?
Ever since I was young, I've wanted to protect the environment for whatever reason, lots of reasons, but that was a real value. And so when I started off, I wanted to be in forestry, biology, started school because of that, realized they worked with trees and plants, and that wasn't going to get me close enough. So then I went into education, worked with education for a while, in environmental education, because I wanted to save the world. I wanted to protect. And as I went through that phase, I realized, yeah, that's not quite enough. And so I started to just continue to look for ways that I could make a difference. And as I grew up and professionally, I also realized that we needed, one person wasn't going to do it, one agency wasn't going to do it, and one organization wasn't doing it. And so when we started to bring the richness of the dialogue and really make people real and see these diverse opinions and diverse ideas and concepts actually being expressed, because we all had the same goal in mind, is when it started to become real to me. And this collaborative process can be powerful. I've seen it literally, in meetings when people can take off their hats and say, I'm not actually thinking about my organization's policies, I'm looking beyond that to the common good, and this is what needs to happen, and can get real and start expressing what their values are and what they think needs to happen, and someone else can influence that and say, well, what if we did this? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. And so those kinds of sort of pieces of putting the puzzle together, if you will, to see that the whole of working towards the solution. I didn't do that good at all. I want to cut.
That was a warm-up.
That was a do-over completely.
Do you want to do a quick sound check?
Nope.
ABC.
Make sure our microphone battery
ABC.
is up.
ABC. ABC.
Okay. I'll ask the question again, and then count to 3. What do we mean by science-based decision-making?
Science-based decision-making is sort of interesting in that when people hear it, they often think of the hard sciences, which are absolutely critical to have in decision-making. We need to know what's going on, both physically, biologically, But I would also contend that we also have to know what's going on with the people side of things, economically, socially, behaviorally, if we're really going to implement something that will either change behaviors or find a solution. And for instance, I work in NOAA, and NOAA is amazing in terms of its physical science. We got that down. We work on that all the time. Weather Service, great. There's lots of things going on there. Biological, we're pretty good on that too. But I have to say, we have a long way to go with social sciences. And when I talk about social science, I think of both the data and the information as well as the methods. So with the data, it could be economic data, it could be attitudes, it could be behavioral, how people behave, what do they value. And in order, if we have that information and we actually couple it with the biological and the physical, it becomes powerful. Example, when we talk about hurricanes coming on shore, Hurricane Katrina, they had the information, the physical information, the hurricanes coming. What makes people actually leave? It's a social science. It's what they value. It's why people make the decisions. And so we need to couple both of those pieces in order to get that hard science used. And when we talk about the methods, it's engaging, it's the trust, it's the relationship building, but it's also the methods by which we engage or understand people better. And so things like collaborative process, one example, great example of a method that's based in social science. And so in order to actually affect those big issues in the coastal management, we have to integrate all three. And if we keep forgetting about the people, we may have the best biological or the best physical data, but until we actually start working on the social side too, we're never going to get those solutions made. We have to find that power of all three, because we're ultimately making decisions in a society that has values. And as much as we'd like, we don't make decisions just typically based on physical data. We also need the values and the social side too.
Wow. I'm so glad.